This presentation examines childhood food insecurity in the United States as a social problem that affects children right now, not only as future adults. The core argument is that food insecurity is not simply a private household difficulty or a matter of individual choices at the grocery store. It is a structural childhood issue. It is shaped by poverty, wages, housing costs, local food prices, transportation, school policy, public benefits, stigma, and the uneven geography of opportunity. I will use the sociology of childhood to frame children as active social actors whose lives are shaped by institutions. Children do not choose the labor market, the rent, the price of milk, or the rules attached to food assistance, but they live inside the consequences. Food insecurity can enter a child's life as a skipped breakfast, a distracted school day, a parent's stress, a school lunch line, a friend's birthday party, or the quiet calculation of whether there is enough food left for everyone. The presentation moves from definition and scope to inequality and sociological theory, then to developmental and school effects, family trade-offs, and policy responses. The goal is not to make hunger look sad enough to be persuasive. The goal is to show that food insecurity is a predictable outcome of social arrangements, and therefore something social policy can reduce. I want to begin by separating two terms that often get blended together. The USDA defines food insecurity as a household-level economic and social condition involving limited or uncertain access to adequate food. Hunger is different. Hunger is an individual physical condition, the feeling or pain that may result when a person has gone without enough food. Food insecurity is the wider condition that makes hunger more likely, but it also includes uncertainty, worry, substitution, rationing, and trade-offs. That distinction matters for a Sociology of Childhood project because children may experience food insecurity even when adults are successfully shielding them from hunger. A parent may skip meals. A caregiver may stretch a bag of rice across several days. A teenager may say they are not hungry because they have learned very quietly that there may not be enough. A child may receive calories but not consistent nutritious meals. On paper, the child ate. In daily life, the child learned that food is unstable. The working thesis of this presentation is that childhood food insecurity in the United States is a structural social problem that shapes development, school experiences, family life, socialization, and future opportunity. It is not just about what is in the refrigerator. It is about the institutions surrounding the refrigerator: wages, housing, schools, benefit rules, transportation systems, neighborhood food access, healthcare, and cultural narratives about poverty. Food insecurity is also a childhood issue because it enters the ordinary places where children become social beings. Breakfast before school, lunch in the cafeteria, snacks after practice, birthday parties, sleepovers, asking a parent for something from the store. These are small scenes, but they are where children learn security, status, trust, embarrassment, independence, and belonging. Tiny tray, big sociology. The scope is substantial. According to USDA Economic Research Service data for 2024, 13.7% of all U.S. households were food insecure. The rate was higher among households with children, 18.4%, or about 6.7 million households with children. Within that group, USDA distinguishes between households where adults were food insecure but children were protected, and households where children themselves were also food insecure. In 2024, 3.3 million households with children had food insecurity among both adults and children. USDA also estimated that 7.3 million children lived in households where children and adults were food insecure. At the most severe end, about 751,000 children lived in households where a child experienced very low food security. That means eating patterns were disrupted and food intake was reduced because the household lacked money or other resources for food. The pie chart on this slide comes from USDA ERS and shows how households with children were distributed across food security categories in 2024. The largest share of households with children were food secure, but the insecure share is too large to dismiss as rare. Nearly 1 in 5 households with children faced food insecurity. The sociological point is that a problem at this scale cannot be explained by a million isolated bad choices. It has to be read through institutions. Wages, rent, benefit eligibility, food costs, transportation, childcare, school meals, and local food systems all shape whether families can keep food stable. Children may be the smallest people in the household, but they are not outside the economy. They are inside it, just without adult power. Food insecurity is not randomly scattered across the population. It follows inequality. The bar chart uses USDA ERS 2024 household data. For all households, the food insecurity rate was 13.7%. For households with children, it was 18.4%. For Black, non-Hispanic households, it was 24.4%. For Hispanic households, it was 20.2%. For households headed by a woman with no spouse present, it was 36.8%. For households below the official poverty line, it was 39.4%. These numbers should be read sociologically, not as a hierarchy of personal responsibility. They show where economic insecurity and institutional disadvantage become concentrated. A single parent may face lower wages, childcare costs, unpredictable scheduling, and fewer backup resources. A low-income family may be choosing among food, rent, utilities, transportation, medicine, and school expenses. Race and ethnicity matter because they are connected to long histories of unequal access to housing, wealth, healthcare, schooling, and employment. Geography matters too, feeding America's map. The Meal Gap 2025 reports that food insecurity exists in every U.S. county and congressional district. It also reports that the highest rates are concentrated in the South and in rural counties, and that child food insecurity can approach 50% in some areas. That means children can be growing up in counties where scarcity is not unusual. It is woven into the local economy. For this course, the important move is to connect inequality to childhood as lived experience. A child does not need to know the phrase structural inequality to feel the results. The results may look like being hungry in math class, pretending not to notice someone else's snack, or understanding far too young that asking for food can make adults look worried. The course lens matters because this project is not a nutrition pamphlet. It is a sociology of childhood project. Corsaro and Everett argue that children are active social agents and that childhood is also a structural form. Childhood is temporary for any one child, but it is a permanent social category, like age or class. Children live in childhoods organized by adults and institutions, but they also interpret, negotiate, and participate in those worlds. Food insecurity sits right at that intersection. Children are not passive containers into which poverty pours itself. They notice, adapt, protect adults, compare themselves to peers, make jokes, hide embarrassment, and sometimes develop forms of competence that adults do not fully see. But their agency is constrained. They usually cannot set wages, sign leases, drive to another grocery store, change school meal policy, or repair the benefit cliff. That is why agency and structure need to be held together. This slide also uses a person and environment frame and the micro, meso, and macro levels of analysis. At the micro level, food insecurity affects the child's body, stress response, attention, mood, and self-concept. At the meso level, it affects family routines, school interactions, pediatric care, peer relationships, and the classroom. At the macro level, it is tied to wages, housing, public benefits, food prices, racism, rural infrastructure, and policy design. The diagram shows the child at the center. Not because the child caused the problem, but because the child lives where all of these systems meet. Family, school, market, policy, and community are not background scenery. They are active parts of the child's environment. In a sociological analysis, the question becomes, which systems are supporting childhood, and which systems are asking children to absorb instability that adults created? The developmental literature helps explain why food insecurity matters, even when a child is not visibly hungry. The Harvard Center on the Developing Child offers 3 design principles for improving outcomes for children and families. Support and responsive relationships strengthen core skills and reduce sources of stress. Food insecurity touches all 3. First, to constrain responsive relationships. This does not mean food insecure parents are less loving. That would be lazy and unfair. It means scarcity takes up mental space. When caregivers are constantly calculating bills, meals, transportation, and eligibility rules, the environment becomes heavier. The child may still be deeply loved, but the adults are doing care under pressure. Second, food insecurity can interfere with core life skills. Harvard uses this phrase to refer to executive function and self-regulation skills, including focusing attention, adapting to change, planning ahead, and controlling impulses. These skills are not built in a vacuum. They develop through practice, routine, coaching, and relationships. A hungry or stressed child is being asked to regulate a body that may already be on alert. Third, food insecurity is itself a source of stress. CDC material on adverse childhood experiences notes that not having enough food to eat can be one of the experiences that affects health and well-being. CDC also explains that toxic stress can affect brain development, immune function, stress response systems, attention, decision-making, and learning. The scholarly food insecurity literature is careful about language, and I want to be careful too. Much of the research identifies associations rather than simple one-direction causation. De Oliveira and colleagues' systematic review and meta-analysis connects household food insecurity with developmental risk and cognitive and vocabulary outcomes in early childhood. Shankar, Chung, and Frank's systematic review connects food insecurity with behavioral, emotional, academic, and cognitive outcomes across childhood and adolescence. The exact mechanisms vary, but the pattern is consistent enough to matter. Food insecurity is not just a missed meal. It is instability traveling through a child's developmental environment. Food insecurity becomes especially visible at school because school is where development, socialization, and public policy meet in one room. The cafeteria is not just a place where children receive nutrients. It is also a social stage. Children compare lunches, negotiate lines, notice who gets what, learn school rules, and form feelings about status and belonging. The American Academy of Pediatrics treats food insecurity as a child health issue and notes links with concentration, school performance, emotional distress, and behavioral problems. Jyoti, Frangio, and Jones used longitudinal data from a nationally representative sample of children followed from kindergarten through third grade and found food insecurity related to academic performance, weight gain, and social skills. Shankar, Chung, and Frank's systematic review also connects food insecurity with behavioral, emotional, academic, and cognitive outcomes. Again, the language matters. Food insecurity does not mechanically produce one identical outcome in every child. Children differ. Families differ. Schools differ. Protective factors matter. But food insecurity increases developmental and social risk because it adds instability to contexts where children are expected to learn, regulate emotions, follow rules, and connect with peers. School meals are therefore doing more than feeding bodies. They can protect attention. They can reduce stigma when access is universal. They can support attendance and participation. They can also become stigmatizing if children are singled out, charged debt, denied choice, or made to feel that needing lunch is a personal failing. This is where the sociology of childhood sharpens the analysis. Children are not only future workers whose academic scores might be affected, they are people in peer cultures right now. They may know which line is for which meal. They may know who brings brand name snacks. They may know how to hide need. Food is social. It is also one of the first places where inequality learns to sit at the same table as childhood. Within households, food insecurity is often managed so intensely that outsiders may not see it. This is one reason individual blame is such a poor analytical tool. Families are making choices, but they are making choices inside constraints. Knowles and colleagues' qualitative study, with the memorable title, "Do You Want to Breathe or Eat?" used parent perspectives to examine child health consequences, trade-offs, and toxic stress. Parents described choices among food, rent, utilities, medicine, and safety. That is the household math of scarcity. It is not a spreadsheet with neat columns. It is a set of decisions that can change by the week: the paycheck, the utility bill, the school calendar, the car repair, or the child's illness. Fielding Singh's sociological work also helps push against the idea that food choices are simply a matter of good or bad parenting. Families feed children inside unequal conditions of time, money, neighborhood access, cultural expectations, race, class, and stress. In this sense, the dinner table is not outside social inequality. It is one of the places where inequality becomes intimate. Food insecurity can also affect parents and caregivers emotionally. A 2022 systematic review by Kane and colleagues found associations between food insecurity and mental health outcomes in both parents and children. This matters because parent well-being and child well-being are linked. When adults are under pressure, children are living close to that pressure, even when adults are doing everything possible to protect them. Children are good at reading the room. They may notice when adults are tense at the checkout line, when the answer to a snack request changes near the end of the month, or when certain foods disappear. Some children respond with silence, some with behavior, some with caretaking, some with jokes. The sociological point is not that food insecure families lack care. Often they are full of care. The problem is that care is being asked to carry the weight of policy, wages, housing, and food prices. That is a rude amount of luggage for one dinner table. The solution, however, should not be to toss a quick assemblage of acronyms onto the last slide like confetti. The sociological question is whether programs reduce the stress load before it reaches the child. SNAP is the largest federal nutrition assistance program and helps eligible households buy food. USDA ERS reports that SNAP served an average of 41.7 million participants per month in fiscal year 2024, with children making up a large share of participants. WIC focuses earlier on the life course. It supports low-income pregnant and postpartum participants, infants, and children under age 5 through food benefits, nutrition education, breastfeeding support, and health and social service referrals. That makes it especially relevant to early development. Schools are also major food security institutions. The National School Lunch Program provides free or low-cost lunches in nearly 100,000 schools and residential child care institutions. USDA ERS reports that 4.8 billion lunches were served in fiscal year 2024. School meals matter because they meet children where they already are, in the institution where learning, peer culture, and public responsibility come together. The Community Eligibility Provision, or CEP, is especially important for stigma reduction. The CEP allows eligible high-poverty schools and districts to serve breakfast and lunch at no cost to all students without collecting household applications. That can remove the visible line between the children who can pay and the children who cannot. Stigma is not a side issue, it is part of children's social experience. Sunbucks, also called summer EBT, helps address the summer gap by providing a grocery benefit for eligible school-age children when school is out. Pediatric screening and referral, recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics, adds another access point by making food insecurity visible in healthcare settings. The strongest policy response is layered: income support, food benefits, school meals, early childhood nutrition, summer coverage, pediatric screening, and local food access. In Harvard's language, the goal is to support relationships, strengthen skills, and reduce stress. In plain language, how about we stop asking children to absorb adult systems that could have been designed better? The conclusion returns to the main point. Childhood food insecurity is not only a food problem, it is a development problem, a school problem, a family stress problem, a peer culture problem, and an inequality problem. The sociology of childhood helps us avoid two weak explanations. The first weak explanation is individual blame, the idea that families simply need to make better choices. The research does not support such a narrow reading. Food insecurity is patterned by income, race and ethnicity, family structure, geography, public benefits, local food costs, and access to institutions. The second weak explanation is treating children only as future adults. Children are affected right now. They are learning, playing, socializing, comparing, coping, and developing under the conditions society provides. A strong response must therefore be structural and child-centered. SNAP, WIC, school meals, the CEP, Sunbucks, pediatric screening, and local food access are not charity extras. They are institutional tools for making childhood more stable. The policy test is straightforward. Does the program reduce uncertainty, protect dignity, support families, and let children participate in school and peer life without carrying the shame of scarcity? Children should not have to become experts in household budgeting before they can sit down and have lunch. They should not have to wonder whether asking for seconds will make an adult's face change. The goal is ordinary and radical at the same time. Reliable food access should be normal enough that children can spend their energy on learning, play, relationships, and becoming themselves. The measure of a society is not how well it feeds its strongest members, but whether every child has the opportunity to reach their full potential.